Christopher Kang'ombe, an engineer and Kamfinsa Member of Parliament. Thank you so much for joining me on this day.
Thanks for inviting me today.
Yeah. We'll talk about the mining sector. Our entire interview is about the mining sector and how it can contribute to economic growth in the country. But let's start off, first of all, with just getting your perspective. There's a lot of opinion around the mining sector in Zambia, and divided opinion. Some people feel that it is underperforming, others feel that it is on the rise. What is your assessment?
Well, first of all, I'm excited that we're discussing mining. Ordinarily, when I'm invited for different interviews, people want me to start discussing personalities. This person said this person said this, which I think is something that I find challenging. So I'm in the right space, I believe. Mining sector. What's the state of the mining sector? My general opinion is that indicators are showing that in terms of production of copper, because one of the indicators you want to utilize to assess whether we're getting anything in terms of some activity in the sector is how much copper we're producing. Remember 2 years ago we produced the lowest, I think in 14 years. We were sitting right somewhere around 700,000 metric tons of copper, which showed that we were not producing enough. Now, last year's figures showed that we are going towards 840,000. My anticipation is that this year we might see the figure going up. Of course, Minister of Finance, Minister of Mines, the President, when he came to open Parliament, did indicate that we'll get to 1 million. Now, that is a key indicator in terms of how much copper would you want to produce, because your taxes are based on the production of copper. Your taxes are based on how much profit each mine is making, so that then filters into our revenue as a country. So my general perspective is that Kalumbila was always going to produce more. Kansanshi was always going to produce more. Barrick Gold, which is Lumwana, was always going to produce more 1 or 2 years later. So there are good signs that the copper production will go up. So that gives you an idea of what may be happening in the sector. There's activity happening. But at the end of the day, I think that as we go into the program, my concern always comes in terms of these projected increments. How do they then benefit the Zambians, which then is another topic. But I think that the indicators are that the sector is performing in terms of copper production.
And we'll be getting into that, really talking about the trickle-down effect and for people to benefit from all of this. But let's start also by understanding, from your perspective, what has prevented the mining sector of Zambia translating this long history into tangible benefits for people of this country?
Well, mining has been through 3 phases. If you followed clearly our history, we had a period from 1935 when Zambia used to do the first copper mining. It should have been in Kitwe. The first shaft was sunk at Inkana in Kitwe. 1935 up to independence, we still had foreign investment in terms of who was running the mines. Then we reached a stage where we said it's time we nationalized. Of course, we had our own challenges. At that time, we had very few people that were skilled. We had very few qualified engineers. We had very few people who could do cost accounting, to know the costs of a mine, how to manage your profits, how to do everything. That phase passed. Then we decided in 1996 that we need to allow some form of partnerships with the private sector. So government decided, let's privatize the mines. Now, what has prevented people to be able to say, well, the sector is taking here our benefits? I think the biggest challenge has been, despite the cycle of the price of copper going up, there's a cycle. There's always a time when you can get your $8,000 a ton of copper. Now the cycle has moved, it's now 9,800. I don't see the copper price dropping any further. And the reason is very simple. Bloomberg is saying the demand is high. All the online reporters that do commercial reporting will tell you that the price for copper will keep rising slowly, but it will never drop. And the reason is very simple. China is doing electric vehicles. America is doing electric vehicles. Sweden is doing electric vehicles. And of course, the population is increasing, so you need your copper cables for wiring your buildings. So do we see the demand going down? I don't see the demand going down. So now, how do we get the ownership structure correctly? Because if I'm a Zambian and I hear Kansanshi is putting in $1 billion into what they are calling S3. It will excite everyone in terms of the numbers, but then where do we place Zambians? Is it just government taking their taxes, or we need to structure it differently in the entire value chain? So if you ask me, where do I think we don't see Zambians feeling the benefits of a boom or the high price of copper? It's the ownership structure. There's really no ownership that gives us the value that we need to have.
We'll break down the ownership structure, but you said something that I find quite interesting.
Yeah.
I hate to be the pessimist, but if the demand is growing,
Yeah.
it also guarantees one thing for sure for Zambia, that your asset, which is depleting faster than you would have estimated, because
Exactly.
then the demand is increasing.
Yeah.
Does that then mean mining, copper mining, as Zambia perceives it, is just overrated?
Well, the reality is that eventually the resource will run out. And this is why, for me, if you followed my conversations in Parliament, my point has been the current mining resource is already being exploited. We're doing what we're calling geophysical mapping. Now, mapping doesn't mean you know the volume of minerals you have. Mapping simply means you have an idea of where the minerals are sitting. You don't even know what minerals they are. Then you have to do what is called exploration. Now, if the resource is depleting, it simply means that people are exploring the resource, they are mining the resource, and the resource is being exported. And we only get what? Forex out of mining. I think 80% of our forex is from the mining sector. And because the resource is depleting, clearly we need to have a plan on how we'll utilize the remaining resource, but also even if we utilize the remaining resource, how far does it take the country? Does it take us 37 years into the future? I don't know how many of us who are in politics today will be there at that time. I don't know these technocrats running the ministry where they will be 37 years from now. But I think clearly we don't have a plan for sustainability. We really don't have a plan that says, if we're going to run for the next 30 years, after the 30th year, this is what Zambia will be doing. I think we have a challenge, and I think that challenge needs to be discussed. Clearly, we need to discuss that conversation.
Because when you look at the gross domestic product of the country,
Or GDP.
the mining sector is actually sitting very low there. But when it comes to the exports,
Yeah.
it is the major thing we are exporting to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Isn't this then a direct demonstration of why Zambian economic growth has been so slow, that everything we produce, or most of the things that we produce, don't go anywhere? It's just the copper that has not had any value added onto it.
Well, our GDP is $27 billion. The target is that we need to get it to a higher figure. But I mean, these figures will mean nothing if at the end of the day you have a sector called mining, which at some point will no longer contribute. And that is why in 1984-85, I was reading a book by the former Minister of Finance, the late Dr. Magande, where he proposed in 1985, he was permanent secretary for the Ministry of Mines at that time, that we need a diversification fund. A fund that will allow us to get the dollars out of mining, put them into a fund, and then be able to say, how do we grow agriculture? How do we sustainably grow tourism? How do we create the right jobs in the energy sector and all these other sectors that were opportunities? Unfortunately, we've not created that diversification fund, despite it being established in 1985 and later abolished. So where have we gotten it wrong? I'm thinking that the GDP of our country cannot have over-reliance on one sector. And unfortunately, like you rightly observed, even the sector we thought would give us the right contribution in terms of the GDP, we're not getting enough. We are relying on other sectors because we have to produce food, we have to do so many other things that can give us more income. So I agree with you, but I think that these are conversations when people are having an INSACA. I know there's a mining INSACA going on. We're rushing towards the 3 million target of copper. You know what 3 million will mean? If our current lifespan of our mines is 10 years, it means that if we're going to do 3 million,
It'll be 3.3 years.
it means that we're going to produce more within a short period. It means that if the lifespan is 30 years, we may actually be reducing the lifespan
to 10
of these mines, because how do you get 3 million out of a fixed resource? I mean, copper is a fixed resource. It will have to be removed, and then the resource will deplete. So I don't know what they are discussing in the INSACA apart from energy and what opportunities present the sector, but I think the issue of does our economy grow faster if we had other key sectors doing more apart from just mining? I think that is what we should be discussing.
There is an issue that you bring up, and that issue that you bring up is about the ownership structure of these mines.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the ownership being by Zambians? Is that what we're talking about when we say that?
Well, clearly from the history I just narrated, we've been through private ownership, we've been through public ownership, we're back to private ownership. Now, where we are right now, I'll give a very simple example. Are you aware that a mine called Kang'ombe mine, which is under Trident, which is FQM, 100% it's owned by FQM. So in Kang'ombe, Zambia doesn't even own, not even 1% of the mine. Now, what that means is that government can only get taxes out of Kang'ombe, meaning they have to wait for Kang'ombe to say, this year we made so much money, here is our corporate income tax. That's the only tax they can get. Government is also able to get pay as you earn from individuals who are working. And then the mine is only able to pay salaries to our workers. Now that is as far as we can go. But if we have a share of those mines, okay? And I want to clarify, because someone will say, well, Christopher wants us to grab the mines. We don't want to grab Kang'ombe mine. I mean, the transaction was done. FQM, you remember Kansanshi initially, we used to have, I think, 20% dividend share. Now we can't get a dividend, now we get a royalty. So I'm thinking, for us to get beyond corporate income tax, for us to get beyond the pay as you earn, for us to just say we are employing young people in the mining sector, I think moving forward, the new resource, and for me, the conversation is around the new resource, what we are mapping. Once we are done, can we give it a try? I've always argued that Chambishi Copper Smelter, it's Zambian engineers running it. Luansha Copper Mines, it's Zambian engineers running it. Mopani in Kitwe, these are colleagues from university. We sat in the same class. They've been trained for the last 14 years since we left university. I mean, they are ready. The skills now are there. Where we've lost it, I think where we've missed it is we don't believe we can raise the money, because we're only hit on the money conversation. Christopher and your colleagues, where do you get the money? So what ownership model am I proposing? My proposal is that for the new mines, we will not allow the foreign direct investment component to be so dominant that we can't even get anything out of the mine in terms of a dividend. A fair share would be 49%, 51% shareholding. If we told Zambians today, colleagues, how many are willing to contribute to a fund that will then allow us to invest into mining, you will be amazed how many people would be willing to put in even $1,000, $2,000, and whatever amount of money that people are willing to invest. So that's the model I would propose.
Let me take you a little bit back, and this is to ask this a bit more explicitly, that we are so fixated on the mining sector and for it to contribute, and rightly so. We've got these resources and they can be very useful for the country. But look, we've got Uganda, which is celebrating 63 years of independence, just 2 years older than Zambia, but has got a 66 billion GDP as compared to Zambia, which is almost 3 times less. And yet the mining contribution from that country is so minimal in terms of their
GDP
economy,
is bigger.
But their GDP is bigger. Yeah. So again, I ask, are we overrating the influence that mining has on Zambia's economy? With the beautiful picture painted as you are painting it, even let's get 3 million metric tons of copper from mining. Is this actually going to transform Zambia's economy?
Well, we must acknowledge that every economy is anchored on something. You start the process of other sectors feeding off one key sector. If you have a country that relies on tourism, for instance, they don't over-depend continuously. There must be a point where you say, I think people have visited our country enough. What other things can attract people to come and visit your country? So for us, it's mining. Unfortunately, mining conversation cannot be put away. And you've cited an example of Uganda that probably does a few other things. I know of countries that depend on agriculture. I know that Ukraine, for instance, is strong on wheat and these are the other cash crops. So is mining overrated? I think that for me, who's been brought up on the copper belt, I mean, who are growing up, either you want to be a football player or you want to work for the mining sector. Okay, we were conditioned. We grew up believing that if you finish school, you have to be an engineer and then you work in the mines. So now that conditioning will take time for us to be able to tell people that you can actually grow maize for FRA and for export. You can make money off exports. So the orientation of our thinking also has contributed to the idea that we have to focus on mining. But is mining overrated, which is your question? I don't think it's overrated. I think it's an anchor sector. It's a sector that can allow us to feed off other sectors. We can then put money in what is called the Tourism Development Fund. I don't know if you're aware that we have a fund under the Ministry of Tourism that is supposed to support people that are innovative in tourism. We have a fund, I don't know how many funds we have, I know it's a topic for another day, and I have my own concerns around empowerment funds and how they are not working. But I think that all those things can't work if the anchor sector is not working. So what's the anchor sector? It's mining. If mining is gotten right in terms of the revenue we get out of mining, I think that then the GDP of our country can grow beyond 27, because the ICT currently is contributing only 2% towards our GDP. Now, if ICT is doing 2%, the remaining 98% is something else. ICT should be sitting at a minimum of 5 to 10%. So what do? We then ask ourselves, the resource will run out. So what do we do since the resource will run out? Can we place Zambians in the value chain so that the GDP of our country then starts increasing beyond the $27 billion? So it's not overrated. I think it's an anchor sector, and this conversation cannot end.
When Donald Trump came into office, he said that the United States needed to drill, and he said his project was drill, baby, drill. And this was because of the continued agenda and discussion, climate agenda, which is discussing protecting the environment, exploiting resources, but remembering that there's an environment that needs to be protected. Zambia is exploring options. But do you think we are exploring enough? Do you think we are digging enough? Or are we going beyond what we should be doing?
Well, first of all, we have a challenge with the fact that we don't own the exploration data because you are drilling. As you are drilling, you want to know how much resource do you have. So the company that has been contracted to do the mapping, they will finish the mapping. The data will then go into another country to do what is called data verification. So there are two companies. There's Excalibur, which I think is South African, and then there's a Finnish company that is doing the data verification. Now, after you do mapping, the next thing you want to do is you want to evaluate the resource. This area in Zambezi, is it a 10-year mine we are looking at? So you have to do what is called exploration. The biggest problem we have in the exploration sector is that the foreign entities do the exploration. So once they do the exploration, they go back to where they are coming from, and then they pitch a business idea that we have a resource back in Zambia, give us the money, we invest. Now, are we digging enough? Are we exploring enough? Unfortunately, we don't even own the exploration data. So what the Ministry of Mines will do after they finish the mapping and the exploration is that the exploration data will be owned by the foreign entity, the Rio Tintos, the Anglo-Americans, First Quantum. These are the guys that will own the data. So are we digging enough? I think we are not even owning the data. So we are not even taking over any mine. I see us losing that opportunity. So I think it's a concern.
So we don't even know if we're digging enough or if we're digging too much.
We don't own the data. We don't own the exploration data, unfortunately. And that is one of the things I've been arguing in Parliament, that we can't own a mine where you have not done the exploration. I don't see a foreign investor doing exploration which is evaluating the resource, knowing very well that the copper is at 10 meters or it's at 1,000 meters, and then they hand over the data to the Zambian government. They wouldn't do that. They'll simply say, we've discovered the depth of the resource, allow us to go and look for money, and then we'll come back as an investor. So we don't even know if we're digging enough. We don't even know.
Is this a good initiative, this exploration exercise that the government is trying to do at the moment? Is this going to help the situation?
Well, government is only doing mapping. I was looking at the national budget. The only line which is there is for mapping. I know there's also a line for petroleum exploration, which unfortunately is for just inspections, meaning you send 3-4 engineers into an area, they go and do the inspections. But the actual exploration simply means you want to know how much resource you have. Is it a 5-year mine? Is it a 10-year mine? Is it a 30-year mine? How much resource do you have? We unfortunately are not doing the actual exploration. So government is only doing the mapping, and I think that for the benefit of people that are following this conversation, there's a huge difference between mapping and exploration. Where we've put money currently, which is a good thing, because you can't do exploration without mapping. So the money into mapping is a good thing. But I was hoping I could see a huge amount of money in the national budget going towards what I may call exploration. Not exploration by foreigners, but exploration by the Zambian government.
There's been a conversation around the infrastructure of the country improving to enable a better mining output, mining production output.
Yeah.
Part of that has been the road network, the transport network.
Yeah.
This direction that we're taking now, I mean, we're talking obviously about the long discussion around the Lusaka-Ndola geocarriageway.
Yeah.
There's the longer-term project of the Lobito corridor that is currently under discussion. Are these going to be effective enablers for Zambia to benefit from our mining sector?
Well, the Lobito corridor conversation, I think, was brought to Parliament. You are aware that one of our roles in Parliament is to ratify treaties, ratify agreements. So government will go and sit down with different partners, Angola, Congo. At that top level, they will agree. But then the regulations demand that Parliament should ratify. So the conversation around the Lobito corridor came to Parliament. Again, on paper, these are good things, and I'm saying on paper, because everyone gets excited. But I mean, the traffic, the route, these are Zambian routes. I mean, we don't want to lose income, because currently, if you are mining in Congo or if you are mining in Angola and you want to use Zambia, because Zambia sits at the center, the conversation for me should be from the Lobito corridor compared to the current arrangement. Because the current arrangement is that when things are passing through Zambia, at the border and inland, there are things we levy transit goods. Okay? So I'm asking myself, if we proceed as agreed on the Lobito corridor, are we losing any opportunity in terms of income as a country? Because on paper, the Lobito corridor sounds exciting, but then someone should sit down and give us the numbers. Once the corridor is established, because the corridor simply means the passage, this is how the commodities will be moving, this is how the minerals will be moving. My question then is, and I've always asked my colleagues who are part of the team, are we losing income as a country? Is ZRA going to say, as a result of the Lobito corridor, we are no longer levying this fee, we are no longer charging this fee? So from a trade point of view, it sounds like an enabler, because it means that there are things we have to forego to earn other things. So we may have to ask, are we losing income on the Lobito corridor, or are we going to earn more income on the Lobito corridor? Someone hasn't made those facts available for you and I to be able to say it's an exciting project.
Yeah. But in essence, an improvement of the infrastructure and the transportation of these minerals should, all things being equal, improve our output in this mining sector, isn't it?
Well, ideally, what will push the output? Some people have argued, they've said, Christopher, your argument is not correct. My argument is that what you are saying as pledged investment in the sector, which obviously leads to the output you are referring to, is more or less driven by demand. It's what you may call an enabler even if the enabler is present, if the demand is not good enough, if China is not demanding our copper, if America is not interested in our special minerals, if the Middle East is no longer interested in putting their dollars into, even if you had the Lobito corridor, you will not get the output you desire. So would better transportation enable more investment in the sector? Maybe let's wait and see. For now, I'm reluctant to confirm that we will get that bigger output if the Lobito corridor is established. I've spoken to some colleagues that are in the logistics sector in Ndola. You are aware that for many years, Ndola has been this hub where logistics are managed, clearing and forwarding goods and services. So one of the concerns coming from the business community in Ndola is that they are worried that as a result of establishing the Lobito corridor, there are opportunities that they will lose from their current way of doing business.
Isn't that just the order of nature, that any form of development, the introduction of faster vehicles simply means that the slower ones are going to fall out. The introduction of a better roofing system is going to mean that the old one is going to fall out. And what you have to do is get with the program instead of worrying when they have this much time to get with the program and innovate.
Well, you're simplifying it, but it's not exactly as it is. The corridor we are discussing, what you're calling the Lobito corridor, is taking away business opportunities for a key province, for a key town on the Copper Belt called Ndola. Is it up to government to decide to retain those business opportunities for Zambians in Ndola? Government can make that decision, and it's a challenge I'm making. I was short of simply saying, can government ensure that as we establish this corridor, because a corridor is simply a route. A Lobito corridor is just a route allowing for goods to move from country A into country B into country C. Now, policies have to be determined that still carries the Zambians on board. I will be a very irresponsible public servant or policy maker or someone who is working in parliament not to raise this alarm because I've picked it. And the alarm is that do we speak highly of a project that takes away opportunities for people who can still be carried in the design? Because a corridor can be designed while carrying on board people, and that's, for me, is my concern.
Because one of the biggest or longest points of discussion when you talk about Europe, for example, and the EU is a major part of the Lobito corridor, has been that Europe has developed because of how interconnected it is. The countries that are in the European Union have an easy connection amongst themselves, not only by way of the transport system, but even the immigration system enables these people to actively participate in economies. Isn't this what we're trying to achieve for a better Africa beyond just Zambia? Because Zambia cannot develop without its neighboring countries doing well.
Well, I totally agree that we need to move with time, and we need to draw lessons from countries that have developed or that have fast-tracked their development. But are you aware that every country that wants to fast-track its development, history will tell you that they've never abandoned their citizens. They always ensure that if the change will happen in 5 years, there must be preparedness for the sectors that will be affected. And it's a good thing to move a commodity faster in a region. If Angola is producing, say, crude oil, and we think that we'll get the crude oil from Angola into Zambia faster, if we think that Congo will produce certain minerals and then those minerals will move quickly out of Zambia into Tanzania and through Wavis Bay into Namibia, it's a good thing on paper. But the same history you've referred to, the developed countries you've cited, the European Union, America, and all these other key players that have developed faster than us. I know, for instance, that even today, 2025, you have the American government saying, we need to protect American business. Okay? So are we at the same level? Should we adjust fast or adjust according to the pace that allows us to carry our citizens? And for me, my message is very simple. The demand from the business community in Ndola is that for 30, 40 years, they've been part of the logistics side of business. And now we have an opportunity to move our goods faster. They shouldn't be left behind. This, for me, is an administrative issue. It's an issue the Ministry of Commerce, it's an issue the Ministry of Transport, it's an issue which even the Ministry of Finance can handle at that admin level. And for me to raise it on this platform that you've accorded me, it means there's an issue back home. And I think that it's something that even the European Union and all these players that are running with this project should be able to take note of. Maybe someone hasn't told them. And I thought that this is a great opportunity for me to raise it.
On this infrastructure side, do you think it would be of any help for us to actively begin to consider having another capital for this country, another capital city on the Copper Belt, to try and attract some more attention to developing business in that area for it to grow much quicker?
Well, I haven't given it much thought, but I know of countries where, like for instance, America, Washington is Washington, but there's also New York. So both states play different roles, but they all contribute. So should we have a new center that can allow this conversation, the business side of things, to happen better? Can we have a commercial center? Can we expand Ndola? Can we ensure that Ndola gets the right place it deserves, or do we move into Kapiri? I know there have been these conversations, but I have not had time to really interrogate whether those opportunities, if exploited, would yield the outcomes that we want. What I however, know is that when you relocate a capital city, it simply means that certain business activities will have to move. For instance, you've seen here in Lusaka, when we are complaining on the Copper Belt about mining, copper price is down. Yeah, of course, Lusaka gets affected a bit, but you see the wheels of commerce are still rotating. You see civil servants still getting paid. On the Copper Belt, our miners are complaining. They start asking, when will the sector tick again? So if we moved the capital city from Lusaka, for instance, and we decided, let's push it into Kapiri, will these other aspects get affected? Clearly, they'll be affected. But every change, like I earlier alluded to, it must be informed by data. If we are moving the capital city, it means that will Parliament remain in Lusaka, or it will move into the Copper Belt? South Africa has got Pretoria and Johannesburg. You have the Zambian embassy sitting in Pretoria. But you find that when you arrive in South Africa, you don't arrive in Pretoria, you arrive in Johannesburg. So every state, every city can play a different role, in my view.
Let us turn our attention to local participation. And this local participation keeps getting a turn every now and then.
Yeah.
The latest turn now is local participation at artisanal mining stage, where we're saying it should not just be the large conglomerates, well, the people are saying it should not just be the large conglomerates, the large big mining that should be
the big
digging the minerals from the ground.
Yeah.
But there's also a concern from government that it is participation of small-scale mining that has resulted in instability in a lot of countries that have minerals, which is also true. Like when you look at the DRC, when you look at what's happening in the eastern DRC, a result of mining. Do you think that this is a valid argument from the general population? And can the country actually have tangible benefit from artisanal mining?
Well, the reason why artisanal mining exists is to respond to a need coming from a community. So if you look at the Mufumbe gold mining saga or Mufumbe gold mining scenario, the local people in Mufumbe, if they were carried on board much earlier, if government was 10 steps ahead, even the noise you saw in Mufumbe wasn't going to happen. If government had moved in, they had mapped the resource, they had identified how local people will participate. Local people would have been informed that here's a resource. Before you start digging, there's actually a resource here. So can you form groups so that you provide the labor? So it's the modeling that will determine whether it will bring instability or it will not bring instability. 2 days ago, we lost 4 people in Shiwangando, gold mining. 3 months ago, we were in Parliament. We lost people in Nangoma, which is in Mumba district. These reports can be avoided if the Ministry of Mines is 10 steps ahead of the people. Because if we are 10 steps ahead of the people, it means we're the ones as government who know where the resource is, so that people don't start digging. Places where artisanal mining has caused challenges is that, number one, there's been no formalization. You have people digging everywhere. There's a black market for your minerals. There's a guy who's waiting for you to dig, and then you get your copper. So the argument coming out of examples like Congo, coming out of places like Sierra Leone, where we had the conflict diamonds, those countries had allowed the local people to be ahead of the government. In this case, we have too many lessons. For me, I expect that all of us that are discussing this topic should then be asking ourselves, is the 449 million kwacha, which is in the national budget for artisanal mining, is it enough to formalize the artisanal miners? Is it enough to give them equipment? And I'm saying equipment. Is it enough for us to have aggregate centers where the local people, as they dig the gold, they sell it to Zambia Gold Company, and then Zambia Gold Company takes it into Bank of Zambia? Is the 449 enough? In my view, it's not enough. And that is why, for me, I don't agree that in countries where artisanal mining has been allowed to function, we've had conflicts. We've had conflicts because there's been no formalization. Zambia is a much stable country. I think we need to allow citizens to participate, but it will have to be in a very formalized manner.
And so what has been happening recently obviously cannot be applauded, isn't it? That people want to go and dig, regardless of whether or not they're breaking the law. Their argument has simply been that it cannot just be the foreigners that are digging and getting these minerals.
So the argument is valid that foreigners should not be the only ones to dig. That argument is valid. However, what is not valid is because foreigners have for many years mined these minerals, we're also just going to overrun a particular mine area. I don't think that is acceptable. What should happen, and this is the conversation I think consistently out of the 156 members of parliament, I can proudly say I've been consistent on how do we get it right, okay? How we get it right is when you know that mapping has been done. 34% of the country has been mapped, I'm sure you're aware. And now we need to do the remaining 65%, and that's how come there's a budget for mapping. Are you aware that 34%, by now we know where the 34, where there's a resource, or whether the 34% of the country has no resource? So my question is, who's having access to that information? Because if that information will be used to bring in more foreign direct investment, we'll still have this same problem of local people complaining. So my proposal would be, if you find that a 100-hectare piece of land has got a resource, whether it's sugilite or gold or any other mineral, can we agree that that 100 hectares should be exploited? Either half of it should be for Zambians, and the remaining half, that is where you have the partnerships. These are basic rules we need to define, and I think that we need to get that thing correctly. So to answer your question very quickly, I think that Zambians will continue complaining if we don't give them the opportunities in a formalized way.
And still in relation to the same, how do we strike this balance between foreign direct investment, which is good because it brings money that may not exactly be
the millions
available,
of dollars.
Yes, but also local participation, and this time around not just artisanal mining, but even in the large scale mining. How do we strike this balance to make it work both for short and long term?
Well, I think first of all, let's restrict the small things for Zambians, and I'm saying restrict. If we're going to discuss gold mining in Shuangandu, let it be for Zambians. If we're going to discuss gold mining in Central Province, let it be for Zambians. If we're going to discuss it in Zambezi or Lumwana or any other place where there's gold mining, that's easy stuff. Zambians can do it. We can provide them the funding at a smaller scale. The large-scale mining, unfortunately, has got two challenges. When you do your mapping and you do your exploration, you now need money to do what is called mining development, to open the mine, to cut it open so that you know where the equipment will be sitting. Now, that costs money. And sometimes I've seen investors that have had to wait for 5-6 years to finish casting it open. Once you finish casting it open, then you bring in your equipment to drill, blast and then you get your copper and then you have to do your smelting. That's capital intensive. Clearly, we need the investment in that level of mining. But it's also possible that we can't let the entire 100% go to the foreign investor. If you need $1 billion for a new mine, say in Mwinilunga, the question I've asked myself is, can we ask Zambians to present even 20% of the $1 billion? If we fail, I'll come back to this platform. I'll say, well, I was here 2025. We've tried for the last 5 years to raise $300 million out of $1 billion. Zambians have failed. Can we now rush back to the foreign investment? So, do we need FDI? Yes, we need FDI. To what scale of FDI? I think we can always move in 30-40%. We allow Zambians to raise. We can do crowdfunding. Unfortunately, we have no law that deals with crowdfunding, and this is something I want to take to Parliament, which allows people to put different amounts of money so that we can at least go to a negotiation table and say, okay, FQM, you have the billions of dollars which you are borrowing. KCM, Vedanta, you're looking for $700 million. Allow us to push in even just $100 million so that when the profit starts coming in, we also get a share of the money.
The final part of our interview, I want us to talk about the policy side.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest weaknesses you have observed in Zambia's mining policy that need to be amended, adjusted to work for economic growth of this country?
Number one, taxation. The Minister of Finance has got too much powers, because if a mining company wants to export concentrate, unfortunately, even if Christopher doesn't agree, the law empowers the Minister of Finance to either waive the tax. You know, there's a 15% tax on exports on raw, what you call copper concentrates. Unfortunately, the law is weak because the mining giants can simply go to the minister, convince him that our smelters are down, so allow us to export concentrates. The policy for me is weak because it empowers an individual to do that. You need oversight. You need to fact check. You must ask the Minister of Finance, why have you allowed mining companies to export your copper, your concentrate, without paying tax for 90 days? We're waiting to see what will happen because the 90 days should be elapsing. Secondly, I know there's been an argument that MRT should be tax deductible, and I think the law has been changed. You are aware that previously mining companies were not using MRT as an expense. It was just paid as another contribution to the sector. Now they use it as a tax, as an expense. Now, when you use MRT as an expense, it simply means that you can reduce your profit. And if you reduce your profit, it means that your corporate income tax also reduces. So, will the sector agree to the proposal that they will revert to the old system? Maybe the train has already moved and Christopher hasn't got enough authority. What other policy do I think needs to be changed? The other policy which I think needs to be changed is what we've discussed the last 40 minutes, the ownership model. There's no law in Zambia which prescribes what share will be for the Zambian government and what share will be for the foreign investor. It's so open-ended. You end up having the Kalumbila scenario, 100% owned by First Quantum. So can that policy be changed? Yes, we need to prescribe 30%, is it 40%? We allow the Zambian government to own, and then we allow 60% to be owned by the person providing FDI. For me, I think we need to agree. I'm using these as just examples. The actual percentage should be prescribed in a regulation. Unfortunately, there's no regulation. We'll need a couple of more minutes for me to break down maybe a couple of other 5 policies which I think need to change. Lastly, if you allow me, there's a law under Section 10 which says if Mopani is looking for an engineer, they should first employ a Zambian. There's a law which says if Rwansha Copper Mines wants to dismantle its old factory, they should not bring in a Chinese investor. They should first allow a Zambian to dismantle, decommission that factory, and then they should be paid. Section 10 of the law. But that law is not being utilized. We have all these mines overrun by foreign companies that that are providing services we can provide. So there the law needs to be strengthened because there's no one enforcing that regulation. These are some of the things I think needs to be attended to.
They sound quite straightforward, so why are we not just doing them? And especially that you're a member of parliament, you make laws. It's literally what you do on a daily basis.
Well, there can only be one Christopher Kang'ombe making noise. If all of us are making the same noise, then maybe we can get parliament to buy into the idea of implementing what's in the law. You remember in 2015, there was a law that was enacted, Mines and Minerals Development Act of 2015. In the old law, it was Section 20, meaning it's not a new law. So when the law was split, now we have a commission and we have the geological law. So there are two separate laws. So if you go to the geological law under Section 10, in the old law, Section 20, in the new law, Section 10, it's very explicit. It simply says, if you are looking for a company to provide goods and services, start with a local guy. It's as simple as that. So this week, Cabinet has approved what they are calling local content regulations. So the minister now has to issue a statutory instrument. I'm waiting to hear if the minister, because now it's up to the minister, I'm waiting to hear if the minister will give 30% of business to Zambians, or if you give Zambians 40%. If I was the Minister of Mines, I would sign that 50% of the money that the mines are spending should be for Zambians. 50% is where we should start. I doubt the minister will give us 50%.
Christopher Kang'ombe, Kamfesa Member of Parliament, thank you so much for joining me on this day.
Thank you very much for inviting me. At least today we are not discussing what person A said, what person B said. We're discussing mining. Thanks for inviting me. Great. Thank you.